Hey guys and gals, welcome to 2021, the future. We've got flying cars, we have holodecks, we have lightsabers and hovercrafts and hoverboards, right? So, in this episode, I'm going to quickly talk about how mixing and creating content is not a recipe, it's art. Coming up next on this episode of Madsen Musings. Alright, so I hope everyone had a good new year. I hope you're doing well. I have to go to work in 2 days, back to the grind here. But in a way, I'm really ready for it because for the first time ever, I had 2 weeks off. And that's been great, but it's also been very different than my normal routine. So I'm excited to get back into the normal grind of just doing my side play work during the day and doing my freelancing at night. I have done a little bit of freelancing during the break, but yeah, I'm ready for normal life. I'm sure my wife is ready for the kids to be back in school too. How are you? I hope you're doing well. Hope you're staying safe. So let's talk a little bit about how mixing is not a recipe. You think about recipe, like I recently, in the last week or so, made chocolate chip cookies from scratch for the first time. Yes, I was a Pillsbury boy growing up. So this is my first time to really just make the dough, put everything in. My wife has done it many a times, and so she actually talked me through it and said, this is what we're going to do next, this is what we're going to do here, and it really gave me some tips. But yeah, I made chocolate chip cookies for the first time from scratch, and it was a lot of work. But even as a pretty beginner, pretty novice baker, the cookies came out really good. So mixing is not necessarily like that. Mixing has so many variables. It's something where a novice mixer or a novice composer, sound designer is going to make a lot of mistakes at the beginning. And even an amateur or mid-level or even a pro composer or sound designer or mixer, they're going to make mistakes. I feel like when I work on a project, I have certain knowns. For example, there's a cymbal patch I used when I was writing orchestral music. For the first 10 years of my career, I had a certain go-to cymbal patch. And I knew to get it to sit pretty well in the mix, I had to bring it down about 10 dB, give or take. And sometimes I had to do more, sometimes I had to do a little bit less. It depends on what else was happening in the music at that time and how I was producing those other tracks in the mix. But it got me most of the way there. There's a whole bunch of things you can learn. There's all kinds of books and all kinds of YouTube videos you can watch that give you a good ground to work from, a good foundation that can get you close. But I think that every single thing that I've done, be it mixing, be it sound design, be it composition, all the above, every single thing I've done has a certain amount of just wiggle room where I get pretty close and then I kind of have to just play with it and figure out. And the solution for track A, sorry, let me be more clear. The solution I have for song A is not necessarily the same solution that's going to work for song B or C or D and so on all the way through. One of the most illuminating and freeing things I ever heard was from Happy Fun Time Hour, their podcast. Gregory Scott, Nathan Daniel are the hosts, and they talked about that they felt like noobs because to a certain degree there's an element of mystery when you're creating. There's an element of just happy accidents that happen that allow your song, your product to go further. There's something you try that you haven't tried before, or there's a keystroke error and all of a sudden, hey, that's kind of cool. I mean, you know, everyone knows that famous story about Phil Collins, In the Air Tonight, where they had the talk back and they were just trying to use it for a certain thing. They realized it was a really kind of cool gate on the snare and they used that for his iconic sound. That was not by design, that was an accident. They're like, hey, that's pretty cool. You know, I have a good friend of mine who is a talented composer, a talented producer, and this person is really trying to study the academics of mixing, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. But the thing about it is you have to get your hands and your ears dirty, and you kind of have to just allow the happy accidents to happen when you're working on a project. And you also have to give yourself the grace that, hey, I got this mix going really well on this one song, but it may be a different approach for the next song. It may be harder. maybe easier the next song. You don't know. And so that sensation of not knowing exactly what the solution will be every single time can sometimes attribute to people feeling like, I'm an imposter, I'm a noob, I don't know exactly all the answers. But the real takeaway here, the big pro tip to learn, is that even the pros have this. I've talked to several composers, sound designers who have way more experience than I do, and they've confided in me that, hey, there's sometimes I'm just guessing, and I just get good at guessing. And that's the difference between someone who's a really established pro and someone who is not as established. As oftentimes the pro has more resources, more tricks in their bag to be able to say, how am I going to fix this? They don't necessarily know the right solution. They can hear, hey, something's wrong, and they can hone in on the problem area a lot faster than someone who's newer to the craft can. But it may not be like, hey, I know exactly what I need to do. I need to push this up by 10 dB over here. I need to do this. I need to slope this off over here in the EQ, and it'll be perfect. They might have some gut reactions. They might have some inclinations. I think I need to tweak the EQ in that track. I need to bring that down a little bit. But the exact values, they might have to fiddle around with it some and play with it until it's right. And that's the real big thing to just take away, is you need to have that element of mystery in your productions. Because if you're treating it like a recipe and you're going to follow someone else's recipe, first off, one of the biggest things I learned from Gregory Scott in that podcast, Happy Valentine Hour, is the way that I hear is different than the way you hear. And the way you hear is different than someone else. The problem with using a cookie cutter approach that someone else creates is, first off, your source or your arrangement, your sounds are going to be different than theirs. And secondly, what they're hearing, what they're listening for, and the tricks they have to fix it are going to be different than yours. And so my best advice is just to learn the common approaches to common problems and get yourself as close to the goal line as you can, and then allow just some experimentation. Maybe you save off an alternate version of your track, and then you try some things to see, hey, what will really, really work here and what won't. Maybe you try more aggressive compression. Maybe you try boosting instead of cutting. Maybe you try a different approach. Maybe do some pull tech EQs. You just play around with things, and all of a sudden you'll start to have something that sounds kind of cool. The other thing that Gregory Scott talks a lot about, he talks about this with shaving various EQs all along the way, doing small movements and making those decisions pretty quickly, not agonizing over it, but sloping off the bass just a little bit, sloping off the snare just a little bit, curving things out along the way, and then on the drum bus curving some things out, and then on the master bus curving some things out again. Not drastic cuts, just little shaping here and there. And you can do the same thing with some compression along your instrument track. Let's say it's guitar, and then it goes to their strings bus, and then to your final bus. Different stages of compression happening. And we're not talking about you're smashing it every step along the way, because then it's just going to be a brick. It's going to be nothing really to work with there. Instead, these are lots of smaller movements. Give yourself some grace. If you're feeling like, man, I don't feel like I know exactly all the steps I'm doing, I don't know all the solutions here, allow yourself to play around with the mix some and experiment. Study the foundations. Study the fundamentals. Those will get you really, really close. They'll give you the best odds of something to work with. And then from there, it's going to be a little bit of just experimentation and seeing what can work, what can make your track where it needs to be. It also never hurts to bring in another set of ears. Even someone who's not a musician. Let's say you have a loved one, you have a family member, you have a friend who can listen to the track and just give you a baseline reaction to it. Hey, this guitar thing seems really loud. I can't tell you how many times I bring my wife in the studio and I have her listen to a track, and something that I know is kind of a little bit out, she'll be like, man, it's really, really loud. And I didn't think it was that loud, but I knew I needed to bring it back some. I think I got used to it while I was working on it. So then I'll pull it back than I think I need to, and then all of a sudden it's really sitting nicely. And so that gut reaction from my wife and just hearing it fresh, as opposed to me listening to it for an hour or two or longer, really helps bring my perspective back. If you're feeling like, man, I'm a noob because I don't know all the answers, just the biggest takeaway is the pros don't know all the answers either. They're just better at finding good solutions, and they have more tricks in their bag to pull from. So your job is to learn as much as you can about the gear and the software, and learn as much as you can about yourself as a creator, and try and get out of your own way and create and allow for it to be art, not a recipe. I hope that's helpful. I hope that's insightful and inspiring. And let's go on to 2021. Let's make this a better year than last year. Stay safe, stay healthy. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.